Okay, we're live. Commissioner Saxena, you want to get us started?
Yeah, you bet. Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, April 19th, and this is a hybrid meeting. We'll be here from 6 to 9 p.m., both via Zoom and in person in the Portland building. So thanks for being here this evening. And then before we get started, I am going to pass it along to our facilitator, Amber. So thanks, everyone.
Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. I'm going to take a moment to go over the Zoom logistics. This meeting, just to remind everyone, this meeting is being recorded for reviewing later. A copy of the recording will be posted on the IDC's website. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning. We also have ASL and Spanish interpretation available tonight. And just a reminder, to access Spanish interpretation, please click on the globe icon on the bottom right of your screen and select Spanish. To access closed captioning, click on the CC button on the bottom right side of your screen. Commissioners, please remember to change your Zoom chat settings to everyone so folks listening today can follow along with your conversations. And for the community members that are listening in, we have Zoom Q&A features available. Feel free to submit questions or comments there. While we may not be able to answer all of the questions today, they will become a part of the meeting record. At today's meeting, we'll be taking verbal public comment. You can submit public comments through our comment form online on our website or by emailing districtcommission@portlandoregon.gov. If you're joining our meeting today in person at the Portland building where Sophie is located, she can help you to access interpretation. With that, I'm going to pass it back to the co-chair to go over our agenda.
Great. Thanks, Amber. So I'm going to go over the meeting agenda for this evening. So we're going to begin the meeting with some commission business, spend time on public testimony, and then after that, we'll take a quick break. And then following the break, when we return, we'll begin the iterative map making process with our partners, Flow Analytics. So the objective of our discussion with Flow this evening is to review some potential draft maps, to do some live map making, and then to give direction to Flow on what we'd like to see in the next series of maps. So are there any questions about the agenda? Okay, so and I am not seeing hands. I've got the Zoom shrunk. So if anyone's got their hand raised, please let me know.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Lumley. I saw an email that one of our commissioners had resigned. Will there be a conversation today about the makeup of the commission?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I'm about to get to that next. So thanks for that question. It's super important and pertinent. So next slide, please. Great, thank you. Okay, so we wanted to share that we've had, as Commissioner Lumley just said, we've had a voting member resign from the Independent District Commission. Commissioner Van Ness has resigned from the commission effective Monday, April 17th. So we want to take a moment and thank Commissioner Van Ness for her time and service to the commission. It's super appreciated. And as you may remember from our appointments in January, we all were selected from an open recruitment process and appointed by the mayor and city council. And then there were 3 alternates who were also appointed in a particular order. So the next alternate is Commissioner Green. And they're slotted to move up as a voting member for the commission. So thanks, Commissioner Green, for willingness to move up to be a voting member. And then I'm going to pause to see if there are questions. And Amber, if you can see if there's hands or if anyone has a question, that would be super helpful to me. So thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there any questions with Commissioner Fleshman?
Thank you. First of all, welcome, Commissioner Green. Excited to have you join the process. I did have a question kind of following Commissioner Lumley's prompt around the resignation of Commissioner Van Ness, whether there were any stated reasons that can be shared with fellow commissioners that would allow us to learn from any comments or observations that were made, first of all, and secondly, to just kind of consider any of those comments in our work moving forward.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Amber.
I was just going to say, Sophia, did you wish to respond to that question?
Yeah, I can respond. So Commissioner Van Ness actually sent an email to everyone, but I think some folks, like our city spam filter, blocked it on some folks. So I did receive it and I forwarded it to our co-chairs, and I can forward it to everyone else to make sure you got it. But Commissioner Van Ness did not give a reason why.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chisholm?
Purely procedural note, as Sophia just noted, yeah, that email was blocked from my inbox. In fact, when I send emails from my personal inbox to my city inbox, they are blocked as spam as well. I have tried repeatedly to ask the Bureau of Technology Services to fix that. They've offered to fix it. It hasn't been fixed. I'm concerned that there are lots of emails that are perhaps coming into members of the commission from the public that are being blocked as spam. It would be great if we could perhaps remove all the spam filters for members of the commission, at least until it's a problem. Because the issue here is that none of us have city offices, and so we can't adjust the filters ourselves. You can only do that if you're physically connected to the city network. And if we're working from home, that's not possible. So if it's at all possible to encourage BTS to take care of that for all of us, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Commissioner Chisholm. I will make sure that that's included in the meeting minutes. And Sophia, the team can take care of that, correct? Or follow up?
Yeah, I will follow up on that. I think a maybe intermediate solution that we could do is if you CC the district commission at portlandoregon.gov, like our public comment email, that one, so I can make sure that emails are also that are coming through. Just in the meantime.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sophia. I've had the same experience, including I think an email from Flow Analytics was picked up by the spam filter as well. So I appreciate that. That would be great. Any other questions or comments?
No, but thank you, and I'm really honored and can't wait to embark on this in a more committed, I should say more participative, but thank you guys very much.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Commissioner Green. Okay, so we also wanted to share with folks that both Commissioner Van Sickle-Robbins and I, our role as co-chairs is coming to an end at the end of April, on April 30th. Commissioner Lumley and Commissioner Hanson have volunteered to serve as our next set of co-chairs, and that would be from May 1st through June 30th. So I want to thank them for being willing to step up into a leadership role. And then once again, Amber, if you're willing to facilitate if there's any questions, that would be great.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Cesana. Thank you, Commissioner Lumley and Hanson for volunteering to serve as the co-chairs for this next cycle. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share, or would you like to entertain to move to a vote at this time?
I would like to move to vote on Commissioner Lumley and Commissioner Hanson to be co-chairs.
Seconded.
Great. Seeing no opposition, the motion passes. And just one other note before we move on to the next item of business. So we will be voting on the 2 sets of meeting minutes at the next meeting. And the term of office for Commissioner Lumley and Hanson is between May and June 30th. So we can now move on to public comment. Sophie, I'm not seeing anyone that has signed up for public comment. Are there any individuals there at the Portland building that have signed up?
No individual in person.
So community members that are watching or listening, you have an opportunity to testify now on the website. You can sign up, or if you're in person, if you haven't signed up to testify and would like to testify today, you can let us know by raising your hand in the Zoom or through the Q&A. If you are interested in testifying, don't forget you have 3 minutes to share your thoughts. And if you're interested, please manage your own time. There will be a timer on the screen. If you are testifying in person, Sophia will be there and when we can call on you. So if we could just wait for just a few minutes to see if there's anyone at the last moment. It appears someone has raised their hand in the attendees. Hank,
Yes, I am bringing Hank in. Where did Hank go? Did he come in already? There he is. There you are, Hank. Welcome.
Hello, can you all hear me?
yes,
Perfect.
thank you.
Okay, so I need to share my screen. Do I have the rights to do that? Let's give it a shot. Okay, can you see that?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Okay, hi, everybody. I'm Hank Schottman. I'm going to talk today about district mapping, in particular, focusing on how communities of interest relate to neighborhoods, income, and other demographic factors. There are other factors besides these, certainly that are important for communities of interest, but for the sake of time, these will be the ones that I focus on this evening. So when I first started thinking about this as an issue, I took a shot at using that wonderful Districtr tool and put together probably a fairly traditional looking map, probably similar to what you all have seen from Flo themselves and other folks, with the goal of trying to preserve what Portlanders might think of as their areas, and also trying to get the district populations as equally balanced as possible. So this is, I would say, a fairly unremarkable map. You'll see a little bit of a bulge on the yellow from the west side over into the east, and then also Montevilla is pushed out as well, the green instead of blue, and we'll talk about why that happened. So this was sort of the starting point for my work on neighborhoods as communities of interest because this map preserves neighborhoods. Where possible, the goal was not to split them. And the more I researched, the more I learned the city had already done some interesting work in their 2035 comprehensive plan. As some of you may have already come across this, it was updated just a few years ago. And in particular, they highlighted where in the city they thought that growth was going to occur and therefore where investment dollars needed to flow. And I found that useful in terms of thinking about where to draw the district boundaries, because where you draw those district boundaries would either reinforce or run counter to what's already in the 2035 plan. Many of you are aware of the so-called problems with cracking and packing in district construction, and we really want to avoid that so the underserved communities are not harmed by the districts themselves. And so this comes right out of that city plan, and you can see the focus here, if you read the text at the bottom, is on identifying underserved communities, and in their color scheme, yellow are the communities that already have high levels of service. But as you move more toward the red and then into the purple, these are the communities that have lower levels of access to services. And so I found this an interesting map, and it will influence some of the maps that you'll see in just a moment from me. They also introduced this concept of centers. In the lower left, you'll see centers varying concentric circle sizes. And these centers are, the best way to think about them is that they are service areas for residents. They contain retail, shopping, restaurants, supermarkets, that kind of thing. And they are well-known neighborhoods for people who live in these areas. And a very interesting analysis that the city did was to divide things up in
Hank,
this chart. Yes.
I'm sorry, but your 3 minutes are up.
Wow.
You were
Oh.
3 minutes go by quickly.
I know.
Can I ask a question, please, of the group?
Yeah.
Uh,
Commissioner Lum.
For processing information like this, would it be possible for Mr. Shotland to present his or forward his PowerPoint presentation to us so we can all see it?
Yes, absolutely. He can submit it via public comment, or if you all have a request to have him come to a meeting to present that, you all can request that as well.
Thank you.
So
Yes,
we can-
I would be certainly interested in doing that, and I will send the slide deck to Sophia.
How many more slides did you have, Mr. Shotland?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, you have a lot. I would be interested in having this on the agenda if we could see the rest of the presentation. I found it to be really informative, and I'm sorry you didn't have enough time.
Yeah, if you, not to elbow my way back up to the table, but if you do have time and not too many other people wanting to present, I'd be glad to take another 2 or 3 minutes tonight. Your call.
Commissioner Flishman.
Yes, thank you for this presentation. I appreciate it. In addition to the request that the PowerPoint be sent along, I'm wondering whether if it's not too much work, you could annotate it so that if you don't have the time this evening to provide all of your thoughts, we would be able to benefit from those if you just add them to each slide if there's points that you want to make. But thank you for preparing an in-depth presentation for us.
The remaining slides have that already in the upper right corner. I'll just flip through the deck so that you can see the annotations.
I now have Commissioner Manhattan and then Commissioner Van Sickle.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the public comment, and similarly would appreciate definitely a copy of this through public comment. I think I missed Mr. Shotland. Are you presenting as an individual or on behalf of a specific organization?
Individually.
Okay, that was, thank you. I just wanted to get that clarification.
Commissioner Van Sickle Robbins. You're on mute.
I was just going to ask whether he could finish if he did it quickly. I think it's always helpful to hear something rather than just look at annotations. And it doesn't look like we have anyone else asking to make public comment at this point. But anyway, if folks are satisfied with just getting a copy of the presentation, I'm fine with that as well.
I would second that motion.
Commissioner Monhadas and then Lumley.
Thank you. I support that. I think we can definitely extend public comment, but I do want to keep for just general practice. This is a little bit of a slippery slope in public comment, so I don't want to end up in a situation where we have other folks who realize that they can give longer presentations through public comment and then it feels unfair. So just want to name that consistency in public comment. I think we should absolutely give space if there's room, but want to be mindful about sort of the process that we've set forth and how that plays out in each of our meetings. So I'm comfortable with it for this moment, but I just want to name that as a concern in terms of how we think about public comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Lumley.
I would, if Mr. Shotton does give his presentation, I still would like a copy of his PowerPoint. It's very informative. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophia, is there anyone else that there at the Portland building that would like to make any public comment?
No one in person or virtually does let us know that they'd like to testify.
Okay, I lost there was a comment in the chat from an attendee. I don't see it. Do you see it, Sophia?
No, that was probably my comment. Attendees can't chat, so they can see the chat.
Oh, okay. All right,
I think someone had made a motion. I lost track there.
Okay. All right.
Would you
Can you
like,
remember? Sorry.
would you like to have a motion to proceed with the presentation, or do you want this allowed to happen? Then I move to allow the rest of the presentation by Mr. Shotland, and noting that we have no other testimony being presented other than his own, allowing the time in this particular case that we could do it.
Okay. Hearing any opposition?
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion passes. Any opposition?
I think so. I think you can continue on with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So where we were with this one was to look at the segmentation that the city has done. What they did was they broke the world into 4 pieces, areas of low investment need because they already were pretty well stocked, versus those up here that have high investment need. And then which of those were lower population and higher population. The idea being this upper right corner is the magic quadrant where they wanted to focus their activity and energy, not to mention their investment. This map shows those centers of various sizes, regional being the largest, town is the smallest, in a more familiar map with an overlay of the 4 districts that I showed you at the very beginning. And so this reaffirmed that the bulge out of the west side into the east side to encapsulate all the central city is consistent with that. And also the Gateway Regional Center is all in one district on the east side, which means they will also get maximum coverage in an electoral sense. This map is another cut of demographics that shows income levels in Portland as of 2020, median household income. These are all census data. And you can see again clearly that the east of 205 line has a good solid concentration of people who are of a similar economic community of interest. On the west side, also heavier purple, solid affiliation there, and then a little bit mixed in the middle. And the secret sauce was trying to figure out where to draw that line, dividing that north and south. And the line ended up there where it is to get the population balance I mentioned in the beginning. This is another interesting map that shows things from a renter and owner perspective, two very large constituencies with a lot of affiliation. Renters have very different needs in many ways than owners. Owners have very different needs than renters. And so this map also, I think, is a good one to look at and think about them as communities of interest. This is the map I started with the beginning just to wrap things up. And the 3 points here are the summary you can read for yourselves. I think we've covered most of it already. And I thank you very much for your extended time this evening. I will forward the slide deck, and I would really relish the opportunity to speak with any of you who have a chance to go out for coffee or just to chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Monjadas.
Thank you, Hank. That was really valuable. I wasn't familiar with this plan, so I really appreciate you putting together the presentation for us. I think it's very helpful. Just did a quick search and it looks like this plan lives in the auditor's website, and that it's used primarily for land use decisions. And so in the future, if we do decide to revisit these particular maps, it would be helpful to get the auditor's office perspective on how they should be used. So I really appreciate the introduction of this and putting it in context. I want to make sure that when we have these presentations, particularly with maps, that we can put them in full context, because sometimes they were put together for, it looked to me like it was a land use piece, and I think everything you just presented is very relevant. So I just want to say that, but I want to make sure that we're honoring sort of the purpose of those particular maps to make sure that that perspective is in the room as well.
Thank you. I will try to grab the links and put them into the Q&A before the meeting's over, the full links from the city.
Thank you. Is there any other public commenter on your side? Sophia?
None here, so I think we could do a last call for public comment for the folks who are virtual.
I just note that there's an interesting comment in the QA room by Vicky Payne that you might want to take a look at some point. She does not want to testify, but I take it as testimony. Thank you.
Did I see a hand up from a commissioner?
No comments, and I'm not seeing anyone who is signing up to share verbal testimony at the moment, so I think we can move on.
Okay. We now have a 5-minute break before we move on to our next item, which is flow analytics.
I feel like we just started. Can we just keep going?
Yeah, I think it was, we were expecting more public testimony. So I think if you all want to make a motion to keep going, and you're more than welcome to take the break later on.
So moved.
Second. Let's roll.
No opposition? Great. All right. So we're going to move to the next item, which is flow analytics. They will be reviewing a series of maps, draft maps based on the criteria for you to respond to. And we'll also be doing some live mapping. By the end of our discussion with Flo, y'all will need to give Flo some direction on what you would like to see in the next series of maps. So for the commissioners, we ask that you hold your questions. And so you don't forget, feel free to put, if you have any questions in the chat while Flo goes over the maps. Are there any questions? That I'll turn it over to Flo.
Thank you, Amber. So unless Kimmy has any other introductory notes, I'm just going to start going through some of these sample maps. These were created based on our review of the publicly submitted maps in Districtr, as well as just hearing some of the ideas and discussion that the commission has had to date. All right, can everybody see my screen? Thanks, got a thumbs up there. So this is, I'm going to start with the statistics, then we'll look at the map, and we can go through all 4 sample maps. I think that would be the most expedient, and then open it up to discussion from there. I don't want to get us off track on the first one. So we'll look at the stats first, and then we can look at the map. So this first map has an overall deviation of 3.4, well below that 10% that we're shooting for. You can see how the breakdown is per district. District 1 is the most underpopulated, District 2 being the most overpopulated. We can always go back and look at any of the race ethnicity breakdowns if we want, but I'm just going to scroll down. Within these reports that we'll be showing, there's always going to be this line item about contiguity, and it's going to tell us yes or no if the plan is contiguous. It's running some spatial analysis in the background. If for some reason there was a non-contiguous district, it would say no here, and then it would list those districts. I've seen some of those come across from Districtr submissions. It's pretty easy to accidentally miss one small block and have it assigned to another district. So we're just keeping an eye on that. That is, kind of something to keep an eye on and make sure we can correct that when we're looking at a map more seriously. So this map is based on some of the feedback and discussion we've already heard from the commission. Kind of 2 main points here was a discussion surrounding what might be characterized as the west side of the Willamette district. So you can see the blue district here comprising all the area on the west side of the Willamette, and then one prospective area where that district could go to the east side of the river to pick up enough population to be close to the ideal. And then another thing we've heard a lot from the commission and from public testimony is what could be characterized as an east side district. So that's what we see in that kind of brightish green color over here. I will note that looking at some of the supplemental data in the other web map, this is including the entirety of David Douglas School District, which is right around here. And then Park Rose School District up here. And then in the middle, we have these other 2 districts that are divided right now on I-84 and Sandy mostly. And this is just kind of one dividing line based on some major arterial roads. Of course, this is just a sample map and an idea to kind of fill in the middle from those 2 starting districts. Can I get a thumbs up or confirmation that everybody can see the next one, sample map 2? Great. Oh, not?
No, we're not seeing sample 2. We're still on 1.
Okay, 1 second. I think I need to share my entire screen rather than just that particular map. Bear with me.
We have a hand raised from Commissioner Manhattan.
Sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just make a request as you're getting that set up for each of the maps. You had mentioned that it was based on our conversation. So if we can just be more specific about what criteria is really being elevated through it. It's sounding to me, and I don't want to make assumptions. So it's sounding to me like some of the geographic boundaries around making sure we have a west side district, trying to have an east side district, having I-84 sort of split the top and bottom and the couple of school districts you mentioned, David Douglas and Park Rose, were part of the key considerations there. So as we go through each of them, just sort of naming like what was driving would be really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great feedback. All right, next one is sample map 2. This one has a slightly higher overall deviation of 4.9, still well below 10%. You can see that the districts here, 1 through 3, are slightly underpopulated, where District 4 is the most overpopulated. So you think about changes that could be made. This one was based on a submission from Districtor. It's kind of one within the first 10 that were submitted. So if you're using the Districtor program and you're loading those, you have to hit to upload a couple times. That's going to give you kind of that full list. So chronologically, this was submitted last week in one of the first ones. I believe it was titled something close to Central District. And obviously the main focus for this map, based on our interpretation, was that the submitter believed it might be of interest of the commission to think about a central district that encapsulates the downtown area, the Pearl, on the east side of the west side of the alignment, as well as Lloyd Center and the inner east side to comprise that blue district in the center. This is just another sample. I don't have any other potential comments on this. Of course, we could zoom in later to look at some of the boundaries. You can tell here the boundary between the green and the teal district is I-5. And then the green district comprises much of the west side, but not the Pearl and downtown area. And as you start to move to South Portland.
Alex, we have a question from Commissioner Van Sickle-Robbins and then Commissioner Manhattan.
So my question was just, we've got a lot of questions that have come through about the numbering of zones. And I just want to confirm that the numbering you have bears no relation to the kind of turnout that you see in these different districts. That's
correct. Especially with the use of Districtor, that is out of our control. It's the kind of the colors as you move across. Your choices in Districtor are in this order, and that is immutable from our perspective since we do not run Districtors. So yeah, these are numbered now, but do not reflect what the ultimate numbering will be.
Commissioner Manhattan.
Thank you. I have a process question for Flo and for our co-chairs. Would it be helpful to let Flo sort of go over each map and then raise hands for comments, questions, or to do it as we go? What would be the preference?
Alex?
I have no preference. There's 2 more to look at, and I feel like there might be 2 that are going to warrant more discussion and 2 that more are juxtapositions to those, especially, this one is just one that is from district or was a very different way to conceptualize the 4 districts compared to some of the other submissions and what we've heard from the commission. So I'm at the discretion of the commission.
Originally, when we started this conversation, the suggestion was to hold questions so that Alex could go through all of the maps and then hold questions and include the questions in the chat. However, if the commissioners feel strongly, we're at your disposal. I saw Commissioner Judd had his hand raised, and do you have a comment or question?
I was just going to reiterate what you had said at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
You said you hit it for me. Thank you.
Okay. If there is no motion, we can continue with the presentation of the slides. Alex?
Yep. Just going to move on to the next one.
Thank you.
Okay, here we have sample map 3. This one has an overall deviation of 3.3%. I will skip right down to the map because I think that's the easiest thing to kind of wrap our heads around it and start the discussion once we get through these. This one was created via through a computer algorithm that helps to optimize the districts for compactness and equal area, and then revised to incorporate some of the feedback we've heard so far, specifically an East Side district. You can see that this looks very similar to sample map 1, where it includes the Park Grove School District, David Douglas School District in this East Side orangish colored district. What it doesn't do is keep all of the West Side in one district, and that was kind of to show that there's an option. There are ways to draw these districts that divide the West Side into 2 districts. Maybe one that has a district where Southeast Portland and Southwest Portland are in one district with a couple bridges connecting them near Selwood. Likewise, to the north, you have downtown, the Pearl, Northwest, Lynn, being part of a district with North Portland and St. John's and other North Portland neighborhoods. That leaves a more central Northeast, but also part of Southeast with Mount Tabor in one district here. We can look more closely at some of these boundaries if you are interested in discussing this one more. With that, I will open the last one. This last one, sample map 4, has an overall deviation of 3.4%. District 3 is the most underpopulated. District 4 is the most overpopulated based on that ideal. You can see this one was also chosen from a districtor submission just to show how you can draw these districts in many different ways. This one is more of a horizontal district configuration. And it was really just to present the fact that there are many options to choose from here, many things to consider as we move forward, considering supplemental information, geographic boundaries. But this is still a valid map in terms of the criteria. It has the overall deviation below 10%, well below 10%. It's contiguous. It's relatively compact in that you don't have to bypass and make a very sinuous shape, although it is a little elongated in some areas. So just another option, another way to think about it. And with that, I think I'm done showing the sample maps, and I welcome the questions and comments.
Commissioner Siegel, and then Commissioner Judd.
Thank you. And thanks for the presentation. To what extent do any of these 4 maps consider neighborhood association boundaries? I know that in the public comment, I don't have that particular map in front of me, but that was looked as though that was part of the testifier's intent. And I know we've had some discussion about that as being something that would be of interest to a number of us. And I'm just wondering to what extent any of these 4 very draft options considered that.
Just getting a couple things loaded on my end, but in our review, a fair amount of them follow the neighborhood boundaries from Metro RLIS data pretty well, and I can pull that up on my screen and we can look at that. Not sure if we want to continue with that right this second, or if we want to get a couple other comments before we move forward. But maybe in the interest of time, we can take the next comment and I can get that ready to show.
And I'm totally fine with that. I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
So Alex, while you're working on that, we have quite a few commissioners that would like to either ask questions or comments, and I'm going to go in groups of 3. So next is Commissioner Judd, followed by Ben Sickle Robinson, and then Commissioner Montadas.
Thank you. So just to go back to the prior question, in using the tool that we were given that has all the census data. First of all, just a quick question. So we're using ACS as opposed to the decennial data, is that right?
No, the decennial census from 2020 is what is used for about 90% of this work. The
Okay.
only thing that came from the ACS that is included on those PDFs I was scrolling through is citizen voting age population.
Gotcha.
The acronym is CVAP. That is the only thing that is not from the decennial census.
All right, that's great. That's very helpful for me. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
And then just playing around with the tool, the submission and public comment that we saw earlier, and that first one that Alex pulled up, it had a high. These are the filters that I looked at that were kind of relevant to me. It was looking at using it, obviously the census block, looking at equity index, looking at Metro Council districts. And then what happens is a lot of the layers overlap with one another and contain one another's. And so like, if you look at neighborhood organizations, it contains neighborhood districts and school districts for the most part. There's a high alignment there. And so the only difference that, and even including like the areas around Paulhurst and Lentz, those were very similar to, if you layer those 4 or 5 major segregation. So again, equity index, Metro Council districts, census block, and then neighborhood organization / districts and school districts, they're very similar. And then some of the breaks are very aligned with the Metro lines and the max lines. So I was just going back to Commissioner Siegel's point. And within that, sorry, one more thing, within that equity index, there were using it in terms of a filter for communities of interest and all those other ones, vertical blocks seem to have a high correlation again with those sort of community interest filters. I think that last one where it looks more concentric, like concentric circles, overlaid well with what was defined as opportunities or opportunity mapping. That filter where in the center, it looks at the downtown area and around it, and it gives it a high index for being the level of investment. And then it creates concentric circles around it with the outer bands being less than. So I think it would be helpful as we look at these for us to understand where that overlay or correlating, right, there's a high correlation to better understand those community definitions. I guess it's a good tool, as we said last week, it's a good tool to play with to understand what that correlation looks like.
So I had a couple of questions and a couple of comments. First off, I am wondering, where are all these overlays that you were just talking about? I see neighborhood organizations and I don't see an equity index overlay, or are those all somewhere on Districtr that I haven't been able to find yet?
They're not in Districtr because Districtr doesn't allow for all of the supplemental information that we put together. And that's why there are two resources on the IDC webpage. One is the Districtr tool to draw the districts, and there are some items like neighborhood boundaries, precincts. But then the other web map includes all the information from Metro RLIS and the city of Portland and other sources. And what we can do is tonight we can share my screen and I can show the sample maps with that supplemental information. And what we can work towards doing is getting the sample maps in that web viewer so we can see how those things overlay.
Okay, because one of the questions that I had has to do with this whole neighborhood overlay, because I was trying to square the neighborhood organizations, which is the Metro RLIS, that's what it is, right? But is that the same as the 94 neighborhoods that Civic Life and Portland State have in the Civic Life website at City of Portland?
That I am not 100% sure of, but I can definitely look into it. So I
Didn't look
believe
like 94 to me. I didn't count every one of them, but it doesn't look like 94 neighborhoods are in this. So I was just wondering about the disconnect potentially there. And also when we heard back from various community members, some people were talking about discrete neighborhoods. Some people were talking about neighborhood associations, which can be a coalition of neighborhoods. Some were talking about the larger coalitions of like Southeast or whatever, there's like 9 of them, I guess, in the city. So I was just wondering, I guess then you're saying that over on this other tool that I haven't played with, there are all those overlays?
correct. So what I'm going to show, I assume you can all see my screen right now. This is, let me go back to the IDC website. Here on district maps where it says additional data, go here, click here to access that web application. It's going to open a new window.
Alex, you can't. Oh, sorry, Alex, we only see your map.
Oh, sorry. I'm having issues with the sharing. It seems to let me only kind of show one application at a time. Let me.
Well, while you're doing that, Alex,
I'll now
finish my last question, which is actually not kids, but it's about the school district boundaries. And I guess I have a question about our priorities as a commission. And it seems like there are some priorities that we need to identify or agree on for instance, one of the things I kept looking at was not dividing up David Douglas or Park Rose, keeping those, basically preserving those school districts so that they weren't split. We have a lot of comments that have come from Montavilla neighborhood, and I don't live out in Montavilla or Lentz, and I don't know, I'm not sure, and I'd love to hear from the community distinctly about this, whether the Montavilla neighborhood would rather be in a long east side neighborhood out on the east side, or whether they want to be pushed in because because if you keep Montavilla and Lentz and everybody to the east together, it's too big a district if you run it from north to south. So then all of a sudden Montavilla gets pulled into an inner southeast neighborhood. And I didn't get the sense from the public comments we've received so far that that's what they want. So anyway, I just wonder if there's some large questions that we'll get to about priorities that we want to help drive how we look at these maps. And that's all I had for now. So.
It's all right. I will share some information about the neighborhoods right now. I think, can I get a thumbs up for Kimmy? I'm looking at the Independent Districting Commission website.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So yeah, district maps, additional data. Click here to access the web application. That's going to open a new window in your browser. That's going to have this web map application. Right now, I was actually looking at some of the information that was just recently added. So let me get back. When you open this, it'll look like a blank map with the city of Portland boundaries showing. If you click on this icon here in the middle, you're going to see the legend that's dynamic. If you turn on other layers, you will see them pop up here. You go to this little layer list button. It's going to give you a lot of different options. So within supplemental, turn that on. We're talking about that data source of Metro Regional Land Information System. That is where the neighborhoods are. So if I scroll down neighborhood organizations, it's going to turn on. Now, that is how we can look at all the supplemental information. What I was saying is we can work to get the sample maps in here so you can overlay all these different data layers with the sample maps. But for tonight, I'm going to switch over and show you just a different view from where we do the actual work. It's going to have that same information, but just going to be able to help me kind of zoom in and look around and stuff. So what you have here is sample map 1 being shown, and what is turned on are those neighborhood organizations. So you can see those are kind of those maroon dark lines. You can see how most of sample map 1 districts keep neighborhoods fairly whole. There's always going to be some small oddities due to the size and configuration of census blocks. I know, because I've looked into it, that this census block that extends from the Eastmoreland Golf Course up into this Reed College area is just, it straddles the neighborhood line. It needs to be in one or the other because we can't split census blocks. So it appears that Reed College is split between 2 districts, but that is just the fact of the census blocks. Meanwhile, perfect segue into Montavilla here. That is one based on this sample map. That is a neighborhood that is split. It is large. It's pretty elongated north-south. So yeah, it's a great discussion point to figure out if Montavilla 1 is, should be split between 2 districts or could potentially be kept whole. And then if kept whole, would it be in that east side district or would it be in another district, not with the east side? Did that sufficiently answer some of the first comments, questions?
Yeah. So Commissioner Manjaras, followed by Valdini and then Fleshman?
Great. I appreciate the comment that Commissioner Van Sickle Robbins brought up around, it seems to me the maps that have been presented to us are a good starting point, that we didn't have necessarily the overlay of some of the other equity-driven criteria that we've been discussing, or like a real sort of analysis around communities of interest. And so I'm really looking forward to getting at the level of detail that we were just starting to get into. So my understanding of these maps is that we're looking primarily at population, geography, contiguity, and those more traditional criteria. I will say that map number 2 and 4, I personally would not be able to support, because I do think in the conversation we've had so far, one community of interest that continues to come up, aside from the neighborhood association portion, is making sure that the east side does have representation. And under map number 2 and number 4, theoretically, there could be a scenario where we still don't have representation east of 82nd in the way they're drawn currently. And so would not be able to support that. I would also have a suspicion, based on just what I know about Portland, that if we go that route, we would be moving in the territory of diluting the voting strength of language and ethnic minorities. And so just wanted to bring in some of the other criteria that isn't necessarily reflected yet on this map. And so my hope is that we could maybe narrow the scope to the other 2. But again, that's my one perspective and vote, so I'm sure people have other ideas. But I do think map 2 and 4, I have enough concern to say that I don't think that there's a scenario where I would be able to support those maps that don't have an east side district. And the last thing I'll say is, as I look at map number 1 and 3, for example, I think if we focus our attention, it'll allow us to get into some of those more specific questions. For example, does an Eastmoreland neighborhood want to be in the same district as a North Portland neighborhood? Like, those are 2 very different communities, and the way they're drawn, I think there can be some issues there. And map number 1, I know is looks a little more traditional to me, but as we start to get into the Park Rose area, trying to figure out where I remember that there were 2, Park Rose and David Douglas, were kept whole in those spaces. So want to understand sort of the impact in some of the other districts when we do that. So my personal preference would be that we sort of pick a couple that we can continue to work on, so that we're not keeping things on that maybe already just at face value seem like they have some problems.
Before we move to Commissioner Valdini, would any of the other commissioners like to reflect on her comments?
I could. It's on map number 2. I appreciate Commissioner Benlar's comments, especially about District 4. And I saw the contiguity criterion, say that right, and it says yes, but when I look at District 4, it really does not look very intact to me, especially in that middle part where it looks like it's almost split in 2. So I'm curious how that criterion is reflected in what I'm looking at, which looks like it's gerrymandered. Is that something, Alex, you could respond to?
Alex, can you respond to that? And so before you respond to that, Alex, so I do have a list, and I know Commissioner Chisholm wanted to comment also on Commissioner Manhattas's comments.
Yeah, briefly, I would share her concern that we should move toward trying to determine some really big picture direction that we as a commission can provide Alex and the team at Flow. I don't know when we're going to do this, but I would, Sophia, I know, is set up to be able to do some sort of quick polls. Ask us a question, yes, no, or ABC, and we can all chime in that way, so that we're not going through like hours of each of us sort of responding on various sort of disparate ideas. And sort of, for example, good question: should we have a West Side district? Should we keep David Douglas together? Should we, some of those kinds of questions, which I think we've obviously been talking about individually one-on-one, it'd be great to begin to develop, to shrink the search area, if you will, by providing some guidance. Knowing none of this is dispositive or conclusory, but I think it'd be great to be able to sort of begin to ask big questions and get answers from all 13 of us as a group.
Can I add to that real quick?
Sure, Judd.
Yeah, so again, I think that the supplemental data that Alex showed in that other mapping tool is exactly where we may want to start, because within those layers and those filters, again, there should be a way for us to prioritize what layers are important. At some point, what you'll see is that, again, some of the layers are incorporating other layers, which makes it easy to kind of prioritize. So I'm just basically agreeing and also trying to give us a starting point of where we could possibly look. And I think Districtr is a little harder to understand those nuances and those correlations, as opposed to the other tool that has in it that supplemental data. And the point around the Decennial data use is that ideally it's more accurate than the ACS data, particularly at the block level, which again is very predominant data in that the other tool.
Alex?
If I may, yeah, if I may, I'll jump in. Commissioner Longley, if you want to just reiterate, did you say sample map 2 was the one that you were having a question about?
Sorry, somebody was at the door.
Oh, no worries.
I could still hear though. Yeah, I was looking at number 2.
Okay,
And,
so you guys can see my screen right now, and we're talking about that central blue district.
No, the green one, the
Oh,
number 4.
sorry. Okay. Yep.
Number 4, and it's not really about the data. It's just there's a criterion that says contiguity criterion,
Mm-hmm.
and it says yes, which means it sounds like yeah, it's intact. But looking at District 4, it looks and feels to me like it's been gerrymandered. So how does that criterion work? Contiguity criterion, because
Sure. Contiguity
it doesn't make sense to me.
is measured. It basically is that district in one piece. Could you travel from one point in that district to the other end of the district without crossing into another district? If the blue one had extended and occupied this area right here, then this would be not contiguous, because there'd be a part to the north and a part to the south, and it'd be divided by that blue central district. But because that we could travel through this district, although in a kind of circuitous way, that is still contiguous. Is this the most compact? No. Is it compact enough? That's kind of something we need to evaluate as we move forward. But technically, we're using spatial analysis. This is a contiguous district.
Well, it might say you could drive that way from one to the other, but I don't know who would do that if they wanted to drive from St. John's to the Selwood area.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd take a long time, a really long time. So I guess the criterion maybe is satisfied by saying yes, but in reality, I don't think it is satisfied. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a proposal by a commissioner to entertain a poll, and that might help determine whether or not there is consensus around certain areas. Would the commissioners like to entertain a poll first before moving on to, we have 5 commissioners that would then like to speak.
I would like to hear from the other commissioners. That's my preference.
Yeah, can I just jump in and say it's worth hearing from all the commissioners and using the poll function when we need questions to be answered by everybody so that we can move forward, I think would be really helpful from the facilitation side.
Commissioner Baldini?
Hi, okay, I have a lot of thoughts. So my first question is for Flo. I submitted a map last week and I was really hoping that it would be discussed today, or maybe even just, y'all could email me back and be like, nope, we see a problem. So my big question is, how do commissioners get our maps analyzed? And then my small question is, did y'all analyze my map? What'd you think of it? Like, I'm so curious to hear what shook out.
Yeah, so I think that the best route right now is to submit it via Districtr, because we are actively reviewing submissions and pulling them down periodically, especially when there's been a lot since the last couple meetings. So to date, I think as of this morning, we pulled down all the submissions, and then we've started running the statistics on those, because as you're aware, Districtr isn't going to give us everything that we have in that PDF. If you know the ID number or the name you gave it, I can look it up right now and I can see if we did already process it, and if we haven't, I'm sure I can get to it during this meeting.
That's great. Yeah, it's ID number 180449. And I just think it would be great if there was a process for which commissioners could either flag maps that we're really interested in or submit their own for, like, I don't want to say prioritize, but maybe prioritize. Yeah, but we don't have to figure that out now. My second question in response to Commissioner Manjarres, I agree that, when I saw map 2 as well, I was like, but I feel like it's too early for us to say, no, that's unacceptable, right? Because we could figure out a central city district that also preserves a big east side district. Like, I completely agree with you philosophically, but I feel like it's too early for us to say that's unacceptable. That being said, I agree we need to narrow down. We need to figure out what really matters to us. But I think a few public comments have suggested a central city district. It's possible, maybe. I agree with you. It's a tough sell, but I felt too early to, yeah, and I'm talking about map 2, right? Yeah. So that was just my thoughts. I don't like it either, but I feel like, we need to keep it in the running still, because it is a kind of semi-popular solution that looks different than solution 1, map 1, which is really the most common map that we're getting. Map 3 was horrifying to me, and so was map 4 for various reasons. But still, I feel like we need to keep these ideas at this point. And finally, you mentioned Eastmoreland and Sherry, would they be comfortable with Northwest Portland? As a Southeast representative on the committee, I feel like I can answer that question, and it mirrors the data too, especially in that Forest Park area. A lot of the housing, the number of people who own their houses, the income levels, they really do match Eastmoreland in a lot of ways. So even though they seem very far apart, they really could be a good group to keep together. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I think that's why it's so great that we're going to get so much community input on this, because we will be able to hear a community member say, we don't match, or we do match in these ways. And then, yeah, I have a million other comments, but that's it for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Fleshman, followed by Commissioner Weiss, and then Lumley.
Thank you, Commissioner Valdini. I think my comments are going to be similar in the sense that like it seems like a number of us have started to play around with maps and start to build them around kind of our understanding of what is important, or what is most important, or what we're hearing. So mine are sitting in draft form. I haven't published them because I'm just thinking about them, because I thought today we're going to look at iterations that are going to spark further iterations to start to hone in without making any commitment to either kind of taking any kind of votes about any specific thing that's going to matter most, but hearing from each other in that experience. I'll also share my maps with Flo, so you get a sense. But the one I played in today was has a central district, 2 east side district, and a west side district that includes Eastmoreland. So kind of along the lines, Commissioner Valdini, of what you said, only because I wanted to see. So my reflection on this is it's as you start doing this, is really easy to fall into a kind of design as opposed to kind of making sure that we honor the set of districting criteria that we're assigned to. So, so my question, Alex, to you and to Kimmy, if you want to reflect on this, is how do you keep in mind the districting criteria in the maps, in the real-time process of deciding, of making choices around kind of where to draw lines, because you have to draw lines. And so, for example, I was very conscious of districts may not be drawn for the purpose of diluting the voting strength of any language or ethnic minority group. I was looking at the evaluation statistics in Districtr, and I don't know how I could quite get a sense of whether I was honoring that criterion or actually violating that criterion in the way I had drawn these maps. So that's what I'm interested in, is kind of how do we look at the design manifestation of our maps and make sure that they're aligning with the criteria we're supposed to be working with.
Kimmy, if you have any thoughts, feel free to jump in, but mine are that I think you guys are figuring out as you draw these maps and consider their criteria, supplemental information that helps you draw the maps. There's a lot that you're wading into, and you can draw some maps pretty quickly. And I think you can get ideas down on paper, so to speak, or in Districtr that are going to reflect kind of some of the major criteria in terms of population equality, contiguity, compactness. But then it's going to take some time and some discussion, and that's why we're iterating over these, and we have meetings to discuss them. So I think it's just good to get some ideas out there. We get right away today. It sounds like we're already thinking about maybe there's 2 of these sample maps that look a little bit more appealing than the others. With more time, then we're able to measure criteria a little bit deeper. As you can see, it's pretty easy for us to measure some of the criteria, and some of the other ones are a little bit harder to do as quickly as measuring the population equality. So something we can get to, especially as you're moving forward and homing in on a smaller set of maps.
Yeah, and I would just add that this is where the communities of common interest, testimony and response, and when people talk to you on the street and all of those things, this is where that piece comes very much into play, and it becomes very important when we talk about not diluting languages and that are spoken and things like that. So I would just, and this is a process, and there will be trade-offs, just because there is a lot of information that you need to deal with, and there will, so the lines have to go somewhere, and so making that decision is part of this process.
Commissioner Weiss?
Yeah, I have a few things. Thanks for putting these together. I guess first things first, I'm a hell no on map 4. I am uncomfortable taking out the other maps at this point, mostly because I would like to walk through the different overlays of each, and I guess we've talked about the different data points and socioeconomic status, I think the information around renters, and we've also talked about information around services. Like I want that analysis to be a part of at least the other three options. Personally speaking, I also want to make sure that we are not making assumptions about all of East Portland. Speaking as an East Portland kid myself, like and again, I'm more so from southeast corner. And I guess I want to gut check some of the assumptions that we're making around that that deeper end of Northeast, and figuring out, like where we could either go on, if we should be reaching up over the top or over the bottom of that East District, or that I just really want to make sure that we are not making assumptions, and just want to like flag that for the group. But yeah, thank you all.
Commissioner Lumley?
I don't mind going after the other commissioners. I already
Okay.
talked a lot.
We have Commissioner Chisholm, followed by Commissioner Van Sickle Robbins, and then Sisina.
I'm good for now.
So Paul, are you going now? Well, I just had two quick things that I put in a chat, and I realized that that's not seen by everybody who's on the call. So I just wanted to say that I'm worried that we have these two applications up there. We're driving the public to Districtor, but you can't see any of these data points when you're drawing your map. So then people will draw a map, and then we'll tell them, oh, that won't work because you violated this or that, or you didn't, it didn't show you these criteria. I just worry that we're going to turn people off by sending them in droves to build a map that doesn't have all these overlays for them to even see. I don't even think the neighborhood organization one is adequate. That is one of the overlays that you can use. And the other thing I just wanted to say, as a lifelong Portlander, whether it's factually supported or not, I think that a lot of these maps that I've been looking at, people are drawing zones in the city that allow concentrations of the wealthiest people to be in like 3 different districts out of the 4. And then all of a sudden, if you're in the 4th district where you don't have any of that wealth, you say, okay, well, maybe I can elect 3 commissioners, but they could potentially elect 9. And I just think we have to really think about that when we talk about making a district where all of Alameda and Beaumont and everything is in one district. And then we have a West Side district where we're trying to decide, are we going to cross over into Inner East, into the other part of the central business district and take that wealth? Are we going to take, I think actually it makes most sense to pull the wealth out of Eastmoreland and Reed into the West Side, so that at least they all end up in a concentrated wealth area where they don't get extra seats potentially just because we have them in a different district. I think we just need to consider all that as we're looking at how we slice and dice.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have, before I move to Commissioner Sisina, point of clarification for Sophia and Alex with regard to the website. Is there a way that we could communicate on the website to address Commissioner Van Sickle Robinson's point?
Do you mean to add the criteria?
Around the layers.
Oh.
Is it the question about having 2 different what map making tools?
Yes.
Sophia here. So from the website's perspective, what I could do right now, if you go on the IDC websites, there's 2 little boxes. What I could do is I can combine them into one box and make it more clear that one is for viewing spatial data and then that the other one is for drawing maps. But that's about it. We're kind of limited from the city's websites.
And Kimmy, if you wanna, you have some background with Districtor, but it's a very flexible tool that allows for the drawing of districts. But we cannot add all of the supplemental information. This is by far the most additional information I've worked with a commission or another entity going through their districting process. So I don't see it being possible to have Districtor add all of those layers. And unfortunately, on the flip side, the web map that includes them doesn't have the flexibility and the structure for people to draw and submit maps like they do in Districtor.
And Commissioner Van Sickle-Robbins, I thought you also said the criteria. Did you mean that you wanted to see the criteria listed on the Districtor page?
I just wasn't able, I mean, it's interesting, in the public comments, we received all of these comments about political boundaries that people want to be honored, and none of them are available in Districtor. So you can't see the legislative districts, you can't see the Multnomah County districts, you can't see the school district zones. So all of these ones that have actually been referenced by commenters, you can't see those on Districtor. In Districtor, you have to go, I guess, to this other tool, which I'm sure is much denser and not as intuitive to use. And so most of the public is not going to try to build maps on it. I didn't try and build a map on it. I congratulate the other commissioners who've actually built maps on the other tool, because I just was using Districtor.
Okay, so I can also, when you say school district zones, you mean the elected school district representatives, right? Okay, I just wanted, just so I'm making sure I'm saying the right thing. So in my experience, at least, typically, because these maps are intended to stand, well, in this case, for not quite for 10 years, but generally speaking, the districting maps stand for 10 years. And then oftentimes the school district election areas can shift within that time. So there is that. So we have the school district layer on Districtor as an option, but not the election zones. So we can add it to the web application, I think. I'm looking at Alex to make sure. So if that's helpful, but I do understand we can't put everything into Districtor. It's just not feasible to have that much data.
So we have Commissioner Saxena followed by Lumley, Chisholm, and then Hanson.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Amber. I want to reiterate what Commissioner Wise said. I also have an issue with the fourth example, because we've heard so strongly from East Portland, and it splits it into 3 or 4 different zones that we not consider that one. But I would like to kind of continue with the other 3. And also I'm wondering if we can have some analysis around the map that was submitted via public comment today by Hank. And the reason I'm interested in seeing more information about that map was I found it really compelling. And I was thinking myself about, renters as a potential community of common interest. And that is the only map I've seen that keeps the highest concentration of renters in our community in one district, by putting Lloyd Center and Buckman, kind of the Lloyd region and Buckman, into the in with the west side, and preserving that central city zone that we see in the city's comprehensive plan. So if there's a way to consider those for maps, I would be supportive of that. So thank you.
Commissioner Lumley?
Thank you. I want to start by thanking Alex for going through all the different options, the sample maps 1 through 4. I think it was a useful exercise. I think what we're doing here is we're just showing different ways you can put the map together, not different ways we would recommend the maps be put together. But it was interesting how we all reacted to several of them. It's like, oh, I'm a hard no on these, and I am too. But it was worth the exercise to see how maps could be drawn and how unfortunate it would be if we did it that way. So I've been talking to various community members, a lot, but enough. And I talked to some folks in the St. John's area, and they really don't feel connected at all to the other side of the Willamette River. They don't want to be connected there. The Coley neighborhood is pretty tight. They've got a Coley TIF district that's forming. There's several communities of color organizations that are leading in that neighborhood, and they would be very upset to be split. The J district, I'm still not quite sure how it's where the geographic boundaries are, but I wouldn't want to see that split, and that is right along 82nd Avenue. The folks on the Multnomah or Monteville neighborhood, they don't feel as connected to the other side of Mount Tabor. They feel more connected to the east side. And so I heard other comments they wanted to be connected. And I've heard a lot of comments about keeping east side intact, but they feel like they really need to have representation. So that's what I've heard. And at some point, you're right, we need to start drawing lines, but some of these get closer to those goals. Some maybe can be tweaked a little bit. But I just wanted to thank you, Alex, for going through that. I didn't want you to feel bad about we're saying, hard nose on these. How could you do that to us? You're doing good by showing us these different examples. And just wanted to close with at some point we should have a break. Thank you.
Commissioner Chisholm.
Yes, thank you, Alex, for this. This is super fantastic. And I agree. This has been a helpful exercise for what we could do, not necessarily what we should do. I will say that as I've been playing around with the tool a lot and doing a lot of maps and doing it in Districtr, despite my earlier skepticism, one thing I've done is pull up lots of other maps. In particular, I emailed you all maybe 3 weeks ago now about the EPA's environmental justice mapping tool, which has thousands, I think, of different criteria you can overlay. It is a little annoying to have 2 windows up and be sort of like trying to, well, I'm going to add this neighborhood or this precinct or whatever to look at it. But it's worth absolutely doing that. I've even jumped in my car and driven out to a place like, is this right? Did I put this in the right spot? I'm getting a little nerdy. But I would encourage you all, this is why we're all here, the 13 of us, is to provide our lived experiences, our experiences in the city, our networks in our communities to bring this information to this process. Second thing, just because a map is in the public gallery on Districtr doesn't mean it's a good idea. It's not even necessarily supported by the person who created it. Many of us have been playing around with maps. I created a silly one of the ones that looks a little silly. So I don't think we should necessarily assume that what's in the gallery is a series of votes from the public. They are experiments. I would love, and I don't know if this needs to be a formal motion or anything, but I would love to encourage anybody from the public who wants us to seriously consider something that they've drawn to submit written public testimony with the map, and then a discussion of what they were trying to do. There's no place for notes in the Districtr app. Here's what I want to do. I'm trying to do this thing. So I would encourage folks to do that as Hank has done with his public testimony, as Terry Harris did with his memo. I think that kind of stuff is much more helpful than just random stuff in the gallery that some of them look like amazing art to hang on a wall, but not a map we would want to live with. Next thing, neighborhoods. I'm actually a little, I've heard from some of our colleagues here about wanting to protect neighborhood boundaries. I'm actually a little skeptical of that. And so I'm going to say something that's controversial and may get me hate mail from our neighborhood association friends. But I think neighborhoods are useful as a way of understanding communities of interest. But the hard boundaries drawn by the city's Office of Neighborhood Associations may not actually be meaningful. I'm a little concerned that if we draw districts that are collections of discrete neighborhood associations, those neighborhood associations will feel like they own certain commissioners, and certain commissioners will feel like they have to be especially responsive to the neighborhood associations as opposed to the neighborhoods, particularly given the neighborhood associations tend to be dominated by people who are older, whiter, more educated, wealthier, and more homeowners. So while I look at the neighborhoods and go, this is important, let's keep this neighborhood together as a concept, as a cultural place, hard boundaries may not be exactly what we want to do. The J district is a good example. The J district has explicit boundaries defined by the city, but the Asian American community that lives in and around the formal J district is what I would want to protect, the Asian American community there, not the hard boundaries of the J district, which is actually fairly narrow and tight against 82nd Avenue. So that's enough for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson?
Thank you. All right, I will jump in with a couple of comments, many of which are echoing or underscoring things that have been already shared. But the first one is a process suggestion that I wanted to come back to the question Commissioner Van Sickle Robbins had raised about how we're making all of these different map overlays more accessible on the website without being able to add them to Districtr. As I said in the comments, Sophia, I love the idea of combining the two district tabs onto one page. And I wonder if it could even be like step 1, step 2, step 3, like step 1, here's the criteria that we have agreed on. Step 2, here's all of these cool links that you can look at, the environmental justice map, the other one that's already up there, like open this, go nuts, like layer stuff on, have a lot of fun, keep that tab open. And then step 3 is once you've played around with that a little bit, now open Districtr, then you can actually, you know, if you've got 2 tabs open, kind of flip back and forth and actually draw something, but just making that like super clear. I think that would definitely help me. Second point is underscoring the suggestion of, I would love to hear from commissioners. Maybe there will be time at the next meeting if we, for example, like submit a map ourselves in advance and then want to like talk for 2 or 3 minutes about our own thought process to share out with the larger group. I would find that incredibly valuable, kind of like our own internal public hearing, almost, in addition, of course, to the public hearing from the public. I think I would find that really valuable, especially the like why behind certain choices were made around, you know, where certain boundaries are, you know, various things like that. I would find that incredibly valuable. And then the third point that I wanted to make is echoing what someone else said a moment ago, Commissioner Chisholm, I believe. I would love to see more public comment next time, like really would love to see that. And so whatever we can do, either like on the community engagement side, or like each one of us as commissioners, like inviting folks that we are familiar with to, you know, submit either written testimony or come and submit a map in person, would really love to see that. And I think we had a lot of success a couple of weeks ago with asking really specific questions of the public. So, you know, things like, you know, and Commissioner Lumley shared a bit of what he had heard. I live really close to Lloyd and have done a lot of work in sort of the central city area and have heard some like yearnings to have that, you know, area together on both the east and west side of the river. So like being able to share some of those things and inviting folks to share some of that as well, you know, Montevilla, what, you know, should Central City be together, things like that. And then I'm also really curious in how people define East Portland. This has come up in conversation, but is 205 the dividing line, right? Kind of like, is it not? Does it include Lents? Right? Like how do people think of East Portland? That is another question I would sort of add to the list and invite public comment on. That's all for now.
Thank you, Commissioner. We now have Commissioner Manhadas, and then after that, what if we take a break? Yes.
Great. And I'll be very brief, just to say that I completely agree with what Commissioner Hanson said about having something that the public can respond to. That's part of the reason I was just kind of putting out there to say, you know, these two I think are just gonna, for me personally, are a no-go, but I think it's difficult to do engagement if it's just draw a map and, you know, there's endless possibilities, but having a few maps, even if it's the first 3 that we can share with folks to look at and to add to respond to is much easier in terms of engagement. I know we're going to have a lot of meetings in different areas and there's a whole strategy around that, but in the meantime, I think taking what we're hearing in this conversation and being able to begin to engage folks now that we do have something for people to respond to would be really helpful.
And I'll just jump back in with a very quick comment, which is I think like uplifting specifically those sample questions that the community engagement working group had shared with the group last time, that are things like what does lived experience of community mean to you? What places are really important to your community? How do you define like the, spatial boundaries of your community, like the J district, as Commissioner Chisholm mentioned. So we can talk about how we want to disseminate those questions. So if actually drawing a map in Districtor is inaccessible to folks, they can still share those experiences.
Sounds like we have one last comment.
Well, I just was going to say that when I was looking at submitted maps, there are some folks who have just drawn their community, and you can kind of get a sense of maybe how they were, what they were looking at in defining the boundaries of their communities. But that would be something we could go back out to all the people who have already submitted comments, and we could ask them a question about if they just submitted, especially all of the East Portland comments we already received, if they would just submit a map of their community, a drawing of how they define their community boundaries. It would be helpful to see all those.
Alex?
If I may, I could definitely show another real quick tutorial on Districtor so that people kind of are aware. I've heard some of the things I've heard tonight are, if we're drawing the 4 districts, or are we drawing a community of interest? And also there is a difference between submitting a draft versus actually submitting it. So I could show those nuances maybe after the break, if that sounds good.
5-minute break? Oh,
Maybe we take a break.
Can I just say that real quickly that Commissioner, I think it was Valdini, started this whole discussion out by saying, hey, I submitted a map and how can I get mine evaluated? And at some point, I'd like to have that evaluated. Thank you.
Can you confirm what time we're coming back from the break?
7:48.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So there were 4 proposals on the table pending the last portion of the conversation. And I'm going to restate them for everyone. And if anyone is interested in entertaining a motion, the first one was so to add directions on the website around the layers. The second one was for the commissioners at the next meeting to develop maps and to discuss on the agenda why they proposed the specific maps, and the commissioners to engage with community members from your area with lived experience with maps. And then the fourth was to invite previous past public commenters to submit maps with their reasons. So those were some of the 4 proposals. And then I also heard that it sounded like based on some of the comments and also in the chat, there was a preference for an East Side district. Who would like to start the conversation? Commissioner Baldini?
So I know we've had a lot of different ideas flying around. I wanted to propose, I'm not sure yet if this is an official motion, but I really appreciated Commissioner Chisholm's request that we focus on maps that are submitted via public comment with an explanation rather than everything that's in Districtr right now. So I would, I don't know, maybe make a motion that we officially request that if the public wants us to seriously consider their map, they put it in as public comment and give us an explanation for it. And on the flip side, I also wanted to maybe make a motion to echo what Commissioner Hanson said, which is we need to put these questions that the community engagement team came up with on the website and say, or you can just come and tell us about your community, so that we make it clear that there are 2 paths available and there are specific instructions for if you want to make a map, tell us all about it. Great, you can do that. Or you can just show up and tell us about your community. Tell us what matters to you. We want to hear that. So to me, I feel like that would be very valuable for us to express to the public, those 2 paths, but it's just an idea.
I would second your motion, your first motion. And then let's see what shakes loose from the second one.
I'll second the second one, actually. I like that one.
Is there any opposition?
I'm sorry, can we clarify what it was?
It was putting out to the public the questions that the Community Engagement Committee developed, as well as also putting out that you can just come and talk about your community.
I thought it also included that we wanted to have people who drew maps that they want us to consider, that they put them in via public comment.
Yeah, that was the first motion that Commissioner Fleischman seconded.
Oh, that's our second.
So there's been a motion and a second. Is there any opposition? No? Okay, the motion passes. So there were a number of other proposals. Would you like me to
I
restate
would
them?
like to move that we set aside time on the next, in the next meeting, and perhaps the next 2 meetings, for commissioners to share maps that they've designed, along with their thoughts about what they're trying to accomplish with those maps. I'll leave it to our co-chairs and our staff to figure out how much time and which meetings and how much you want to give. I do want to make sure we give commissioners who have maps to share the adequate time to really kind of walk through them. And in some cases, maybe it's just me, might be a couple of maps to walk through. Because there are some of these, I think, where we are each individually trying to wrestle with a question. And would love to hear the feedback on that. So that's my motion.
Commissioner Fleshman?
Yes, I have a friendly amendment, Commissioner Chisholm, if you're open to it, which is that we set aside that time, but we also submit the maps ahead of time so that Flow Analytics can analyze them and also provide a perspective.
Excellent idea.
So there is a motion on the table with a friendly amendment from Commissioner Fleshman that the committee share the maps and what they're trying to accomplish, and that Flow Analytics analyze them, and that the commissioners submit them ahead of time. Is there a second? There was a second. Is there any opposition? Hearing none. Passed.
Look out, world. Here come the maps.
Commissioner Manhadas?
Well, that comment just made me really glad I raised my hand. So for me, it would be really helpful if we can just have some clarity around sort of how it's going to fit into the agenda. I think that would be really valuable. I really appreciate that being brought up as a suggestion. I think if folks are taking the time to create maps and have ideas, I definitely want to hear from different perspectives about that. But making sure there's a consistent structure, I think, is really important. So, you know, everybody's going to have X amount of minutes to present. There's going to be an opportunity for folks to ask questions, and just having some consistency around that, I think, will allow us to move forward, and providing ample time for that would be great. But I think for me personally, and just meeting structure, and I think the facilitators are doing an incredible job. There's a lot of like pieces moving right now. Having a sense of how that then relates to the public comment. What you don't want from the public perspective, I guess I'll name a fear that I have, is that the public is, you know, they have a moment to speak, and then we're having sort of our own conversation and are just prioritizing sort of our own individual perspectives. I think part of it is Commissioner Chisholm is exactly right. There's a reason we're sitting in this space, but we want to make sure that folks are feeling heard through the process. And so to me, it's important to have a process that is consistent and that folks feel is accessible. So just making sure that we're being very clear at each step about, this is the period for public comment. Folks are getting this amount of time. This is, you know, how we're considering those. Commissioners are having sort of a privileged space to provide also their perspective based on the feedback that they're receiving from different folks. And then just having it sort of move into some space where we can actually make some decisions about then what is the next, like, how do we then hone this in, right? So I think a little bit as a funneling effect, but so that everybody feels like they're being heard through the process. So I appreciate the different ideas, but my brain is like, okay, how does this then relate to that? So that would be helpful in the next 2 meetings or however many meetings we're going to have between now and sort of the community conversations we're going to have, I think would be really helpful.
Commissioner Manhadas, just to pick up on your comment, one of the proposals that Commissioner Hanson, I believe, raised was to encourage the commissioners to engage with community members from which you represent to submit maps. That is one strategy, as well as the other motion that had passed earlier.
Yeah, no, I think that all makes sense. I think from a public process perspective, just making sure that we have clarity, consistency, and transparency around which different voices we're bringing into the space. So for example, if I have a conversation with the Coalition of Communities of Color and they say, hey, I want to see these 3 communities, you know, brought together, I think that's important for me to share when I'm presenting the maps that I'm drawing. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to commit to drawing maps myself, not really my thing, but that would be helpful in sort of that limited time presentation so that folks can have sort of a consistent way of presenting so that we're getting all of the information at one time.
Commissioner Lumley? For some reason, I can't hear you, Commissioner. While Commissioner Lumley is working on his technology.
Now can you hear
Go
me?
ahead. Yep, go ahead.
The backup headphones. Thank you for everybody's excellent comments. I'd like to make a request that we also keep a running list of communities that we've heard from that would like to remain intact, just because I don't want to forget anything. And when I ran through my list, I actually forgot an important one. And it's the African American community that doesn't want to have the inner Northeast area split, around the important area for them and around Alberta and such. So if we can just start keeping a list of that, that would be really handy. Thank you.
Commissioner Chisholm?
Yeah, I was reflecting in the break on I think it was a comment that Commissioner Van Sickle Robbins had made, wanting to try and figure out how do we use the existing political boundaries, congressional districts and metro council districts and Multnomah County districts and so forth in this map. They're not available in district. Or one thing, just as a FYI, one thing you can do in district, and it's relatively easy to do, is use the voting precincts. And if you set up a district map with the voting precincts, what you'll see is, of course, that those voting precincts, those lines, are designed by Multnomah County largely to follow those sort of all the overlays of all the council districts that, different political boundaries that exist. A voting precinct is a thing that is everybody in the precinct gets all the same ballot. And so they're designed to match, where the congressional district and the school district and the metro council and the county districts all match. So you can't see those boundaries, but they exist essentially in the voting precincts themselves. So whatever that's worth, it's I find myself with 12 different windows open when I'm drawing these maps.
Thank you, Commissioner. Point of clarification. Sophia, there were a couple of the other proposals that I think are items that we could probably just implement. One is the directions on the website, and the other one was inviting public comment to submit maps.
Yep, those are all more like housekeeping requests that I can easily do.
Great.
And the other one was a structured.
Yes.
Structured report out, yeah.
Okay. Great. Just a quick temperature check on, is there any preference for an east side district?
Do you want us all to talk, or do you want to do like a little poll from Sophia? How do you want to do that?
Yes, maybe folks could just raise their hand.
If we could do a actual raised hand, because a thumbs up, so we can't track who's actually doing a thumb up.
I'm not trying to vote for this. I'm just trying to say I have a question. I'm not necessarily saying yes or no on this. When you say East Side District, I want to know exactly what you're talking about.
Alex, do you want to comment on that?
Not particularly, to be honest.
I think it's a very fair question, right? East Side District, does it mean 82nd? Does it mean 205? Does it go as far north as Park Rose? Does it in the south go west across 82nd to Lentz? I think, East Side is critical. I do think the commissioner here that has the most information on that question is unfortunately Commissioner Kimura, who's not with us today, as one of the authors of the East Portland Action Plan, and she's been working on this for 25 years. But I think it's a critical question that is worth all of us wrestling with.
So I have two poll questions that I've done while you all have been discussing, and they just ask in general. Do you want me to pose those to the group? No.
I think so. Sorry. Go ahead, Sophia.
I'll let you facilitate, Amber. I have those ready if we want them.
So I'm sorry, with regard to the east side question, I didn't see all of, can everyone that is interested in that raise their hand again? I didn't see all of the hand raised.
I'm sorry, I think that there's a prior question, so I'm going to interject here, which is the question of discussing whether we want to take ad hoc votes on individual items like this before we have a full sense of a variety of issues that we want to address. And I'd rather not take votes sequentially in a disconnected manner until we have a full sense of a set of critical questions that we want to address, because I think that they interact with each other in ways that I'm concerned that we might be having to circle back or limit ourselves. So I think it's great to compile those questions and be prepared for us to, as a group, provide answers to them. But as Commissioner Valdini, raised the question, there, even like when we say we're taking a vote on this, what exactly is it that we're voting on? I do, but I think it's a good question. I'm not ready to say yes or no on it right now.
I think I was the person who suggested we start doing some of the kind of quick polling things, and I think your objection or concern is extremely valid. So yes, I would love to get a temperature check of the room on some of these big questions at some point. I don't know that today is the right one. Mr. Valdini's point that we need to define what we're asking is also very valid. I'm mostly trying to find ways that we can narrow the search area and begin to come to a consensus, knowing that we have until, what is it, June 1st to have an initial something. Time is taken away.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Manhattan and then Lumley.
Yeah, I really appreciate that clarification. I thought it was just a temperature check, like, oh, do we want another map that has, you know what I mean? So I think that clarity of purpose in these questions is going to be really important. And that's sort of what I was trying to refer to before. If we could have sort of the structured facilitation that is more of a funneling to narrow down into specific maps that we're going to be responding to, understanding that those are not going to be the final maps. These are going to be the maps that people are responding to get us closer to making final decisions, right? So that people can respond to and say, oh, well, actually, if we move this over, that would be really, those kinds of things. But I do think we need to get to a point where we start to hone in which maps we're actually working on. Otherwise, we're going to keep having these sort of road maps and it's going to get very confusing. So I think if we can sort of lay out decision points, and I'm glad, Commissioner Chisholm, that you named the June. I've lost track of I'm in the middle of legislative sessions, so I've lost track of all things outside of that. But if we could have a little bit of a work backwards from that to say, okay, by this time we need to have clarity of the maps that we're going to be doing this tour with the public or having these conversations with them about over the summer. And so everything that leads up to that needs to start to hone us in to get us to that point. It's going to be really important. So putting that into context, if we're going to have commissioners presenting on their version of the maps, if we're going to have other folks, then we're going to be asking folks to submit maps. We need a point where that closes to say, okay, here's the series of maps. Now, what are the decision points that are actually going to bring us to a place where we can make some decisions? And my understanding is we have sort of a majority vote process. So I just want to see a little bit of a funneling in the process. I do think temperature check questions are good. I think the motions have been great just because we get a sense of their support for this question. But I think a lot of this can be done just by request and housekeeping. And so delineating which ones actually require a majority vote decision versus what are just like point of process questions, I think will be really important just because it's going to get very confusing as we start to have these different data points out there.
Can you all hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I have a process concern, but if we're going to do a poll or like raise your hand, I was raising my hand because I wanted to say something and I was like, oh, am I voting for this or not? So if we're going to vote, let's do something different than raising the virtual hand from the reactions tab. And then what I really wanted to say though was before 205 was built, it was I-84 and people would often say east of I-84. And that was like the defining line. And then this mammoth highway came through 205, which is sort of parallel to it. And so I think a lot of folks still use that phrase, east of 84, when really, if you look at what's west of 84, that's really more intact than what is east of 205. I said 84, I'm sorry, 205. So anyway, I would like to have the conversation at the next meeting about what is the east side. And I realize we're going to draw on boundaries and maybe we can't keep all of east of 205 in one district. It may not be big enough, but having some expertise on how we define what east side means, I think would be very helpful. Thank you. Maybe we can add that to the agenda for the next meeting. Also echoing Commissioner Mamware's recommendation to really have a clear schedule of how we're going to get to perhaps a set of recommendations for the public to comment on by June 1st.
Commissioner Siegel?
At the risk of adding so many things to our next meeting's agenda that we won't be able to get to a successful result, we've got a heck of a lot to do in a very short amount of time. And I like the way things are being, I like the way things are going, but I would really like to suggest that we have a, Sophia, we talked about this a while back, but a critical path, without getting too anal about it. It's, we have so much to do in such a short amount of time that this winnowing out process, if we can put that to a calendar so that we know what we need to do and by when, we'll be able to get it done. I just worry that we'll meander about the desert and not be able to get out.
Commissioner Van Sickle Robbins?
Along those lines, one of the things I keep coming back to is that is what assumptions we're making about what maps, if there's anything that prescribes the maps that we take out to the public in these zones. And I think that those are probably going to be our opportunities to get the most direct feedback from the public about the maps. And if we go out and there's 2 zone options, let's say that we have maps of that split the east side in different ways, we can take them to both zones and get feedback from, if you're not in a zone and you wish you were in that zone, you can tell us that. If we're trying to figure out where the west side is going to jump the river, because it has to jump the river somewhere to gain enough population to make it, if we keep a west side zone, it has to have more population than is available on the west side. So we could have a map that shows, that, for instance, just hypothetically, it jumps at the center, in the central city area so that downtown extends across the river, or it jumps down in the Selwood, Eastmoreland area. But wherever those are, we can take both of those maps to both of the zones that are potentially impacted by those decisions and get feedback at that time.
Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, I can jump in, and I want to echo that idea. I like the idea of having perhaps like 2 or maybe even 3 maps by the end of May or June that we are taking out for the roadshow in July, so that we are able to have, there are multiple things that people can react to, and we are able to gather data in a lot of ways. So we've got a lot to work with once we come back together in August. So that might even be a helpful way of thinking about, as our conversations continue to emerge or continue to evolve, how might those look in 2 or 3 different ways? So just to kind of offer that. And then rescheduling, I just glanced at the calendar and there are 3 meetings in May. The 13th and 17th are listed as public comment meetings, and then the 31st is as a work session. So definitely, I know, thankfully there are 3 Wednesdays in May, so we will have some spaciousness for this like kind of open, narrow, close conversation that we'll be having, but we can, definitely move forward with that.
Sophia put in the chat just a reminder that the charter requires us to have 2 hearings in each of the proposed hearings in case you have multiple maps for public comment. So just a point of housekeeping, and this is a question for Sophia, Alex, and the co-chairs. The question that Siegel raised around critical path and knowing what to do and by when, and Commissioner Manhada's point around structuring basically the next few meetings to facilitate decision points. Sophia, co-chairs, and Alex, do you feel like you have enough information that we could do that?
I will defer to Alex and Kimmy if they feel like they've had enough information for the next iteration of maps. I feel like I heard a lot of really good ideas, but I don't know where the areas of consensus are.
I can say from maybe from like a technical standpoint, it sounded like there was appetite for commissioners to draw maps and submit maps in district, or we get if those are drawn and we have even just a day or a couple of days lead time, we can process them and have the statistics ready, have the maps ready to, you know, zoom in, toggle on the supplemental data, the other overlays, to help facilitate the discussion if the commissioners would like to walk through their map, specified amount of time, all that kind of stuff, up to the city and Sophia, how that would work better, depending on how many commissioners and how many maps there are. But from a technical standpoint, we can support that.
Yeah, we can also identify, I think, common themes that run through any maps that the commissioners draw. That might also help us, or help the commission drill down a little bit too.
Yeah, I do want to clarify that my comment is more geared towards the facilitation like design and what that's going to look like, but making sure that the content's prepared for that is really important. And I'm happy to support in whatever way I can and sort in the interim in terms of the facilitation design piece of it, just to get us to decision points. Because I know that's a lot to put on you all.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, I was just going to say to that last piece about the decision points, as one of the new incoming co-chairs, I would be interested in a meeting with the outgoing co-chairs and the staff in the next week or so to actually think through the 3 May meetings and think through the timeline that we've got, and then kind of, as Commissioner Manhara said, figure out where we need to be and work backwards, and then maybe we can share that out with folks well in advance of the next meeting. And I'm wondering then, Alex, to follow up on your question in terms of the technical timeline, if for example, with the next meeting on May 3rd is submitting things by Friday the 28th, sufficient time to do a turnaround analysis on your end?
Yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you, that's helpful.
I think that's a good amount of lead time. We could, I'd say I could do it a little bit, closer to the line, but I think it's safe to say that let's say Friday would be.
Thank you. Just a request for Sophia to talk a little bit more about the comment you made in the chat room about if we have multiple maps, how does that affect our requirement in the charter to have 2 hearings in each of the proposed districts?
Yeah, sorry, I missed the first part. Did you say now or later?
Now, if you could.
Oh, yeah. So the charter requires us that we have 2 hearings in each of the proposed districts. The charter does not prohibit you how many district plans you put out for public comment. So you are allowed to put more than 1 plan. And so that's something to consider if we have multiple maps out for public comment and public hearing, and maybe potentially, I'm just thinking, if the maps and the lines are not completely overlapping, then that takes into consideration where we have the actual hearing. So I'm waiting for you all to have an idea of where the the proposed districts will be, because then I have to find a location in person for the public hearings. So if there's no overlap, it will make it a little bit more difficult for us for all to have 2 hearings in each of the districts.
So I'm not quite sure what people are thinking of in terms of what we roll out to the public on June 1st, but if it's 2 or 3 maps, I think that's doable, but if we have more than that, it might make it really complicated. I think that's what you're saying, Sophia, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I think a goal of 2 or 3 maps is a worthy goal. I think we could accomplish that.
Will there be a hybrid option for those meetings, Sophia, in case members of the public want to attend multiple?
Yeah, so all the hearings will be hybrids, just like our meetings.
Did you have any follow-up on that, Commissioner Lumley?
Well, I just sort of assumed it's a worthy goal of us to have 2 or 3 maps to present to the public. How do other people feel about that?
Commissioner Siegel?
Can't hear you. I'm sorry.
You know, you just got to push the button sometimes. Sorry about that. I think it's great to have a couple of options to present. I think that makes all the sense in the world. And you can also then get some reactions, you know, why one likes this one, why someone doesn't like the other. Sophia, one of the things I thought you were getting at is, or maybe the question I have for you is, you do have to find locations to have these hearings. And the charter says we've got to have 2 hearings in each of the, I guess, proposed districts. So you're going to need us to land on something so that you will be able to know and advertise for the location of a hearing. So we'll need to know exactly what that is.
Yeah, so right now in your work plan, and I'll work with your co-chairs to, finalize that. You all are voting on the May 31st meeting, are voting on what plans you are putting out for public comment and public hearings. Our first public hearing is until the first week of July, because we have to have the plan out 1 month before the first hearing. And so over the next couple of weeks, as you all are discussing this, I think I'll have a better sense of idea of where potentially the districts will be, and I'll be scoping out public locations. And the community engagement work group had a few ideas of types of locations to host the hearings at.
Great, and that's why this sifting down and narrowing down over the next meeting or 2 is so important. Thank you.
So the submitting the maps by the commissioners and having process them, that's simply a housekeeping item. The question on a previous question was around how to define East Side. Is there any comment on that? Any discussion on that?
Amber, it seems like that could be part of that meeting, right? It's getting us to a place like if folks can sort of keep that in mind and make their part of their proposals, as opposed to us trying to like negotiate that right now. It sounds like folks have it's a little bit of an open question. So for the facilitators who are working on that meeting, like getting us to a point where we can make some decisions about East Side, even if they're not exactly the same in both maps. I do think that might be good for folks to think about as we go into the next meeting, is my recommendation.
Thank you.
Yeah, so on that East Side point, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Chisholm has his hand up before me. Go ahead.
No worries. I'll just concur with Commissioner Monjarez here. I think that as a commission, we don't need to define once and forever what East Portland is. What we need to do is come up with maps, right? And if we have commissioners or members of the public who want to submit a map and say, to me, I will define an East Side district as including the 4 school districts. Here's what that looks like. Or for me, East Portland means this, David Douglas plus the low-income neighborhoods of Lentz and Foster Powell. I would say let folks build maps, which is what our charge is, and define it for us as part of their argument for the map, rather than for us, we don't need to decide what East Portland is. Although again, I will reiterate that I really do want to hear from Commissioner Kimura about her decades of experience organizing East Portland as we work through this process.
Commissioner Lumley?
Thank you. I agree with that comment. I live right next to I-205, and I recognize that as a major geographic boundary. And if we decide to choose that as the boundary for the east side, it does divide up a couple of large neighborhood associations. And, I travel in that area as I drive back and forth, and they do really have a different feel when you cross over on one side of the highway versus the other. So I think this is something we're going to have to struggle with. Thank you.
Alex, do you feel like you have enough for the next meeting? Commissioner Saxena?
Just a really quick point of clarification. I would ask that maybe we don't use East Side and East Portland interchangeably, because I think in the minds of many folks in Portland, they mean two different things.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, for example, if you live in Irvington, you live on the east side, but not in East Portland, for example, because you live east of the Willamette.
Alex?
Yeah, to answer your question, Amber, I mean, depending on what we're using the remainder of our time tonight is, I do think it would be worthwhile to maybe get some more discussion on the sample maps, how we go about narrowing it down a little bit, maybe at least saying which ones are more palatable and which ones should be focused on for moving forward, and think about recording some of the areas, which I think we already have, that are areas of discussion. What constitutes the east side? Is it I-205? Is it 82nd? Those kind of questions, start gathering them, be ready to discuss. Any of commissioners that want to draw their maps can do so, submit them in Districtr, let us know. And they will be processed before the next meeting. I think all those things are kind of getting us the next step. If there's time, I can go through Commissioner Baldini's map tonight.
Great.
Should we do that now?
Hearing no objections.
Yes, please.
Great. Before I do so, just want to show a couple of those things in Districtr just to get people a little bit more familiar with the nuances. So once you get on the Districtr page, you have two options. One, everybody can see my screen, right? We see Districtr. Okay. So you have two options. You can draw the 4 multi-member districts. That is creating the district plan that we're all interested in mostly. However, there's also another very important option here to the right, community built out of 2020 blocks is what it states here. That is for anybody to put a community of interest or some boundary. Maybe the public want to, after hearing tonight's discussion, draw what they think the east side is, and they can do that. And the way we can see that in the public gallery, as you scroll down, is you'll see those same terms. Multi-member district will be here, or as I scroll farther down, I'll find an example of a community, and they're presented differently. And in either case, Flow is downloading this information. When it's a district plan with the 4 council districts, we will run the statistics so we can see how it compares to the criteria. But we're also collecting the communities that are drawn, and we'll add that to the map, because right now, as you go through these, you can only see them one at a time. we will have them in the other web map with all the other supplemental information, so you could see them at once. So let me, for example, show right here, community of interest. Someone drew a combination of Arbor Lodge, I think they meant, and Mississippi neighborhoods to them. I believe there were a couple more submitted. This one didn't have much description in its title per se, but it's definitely down near Selwood. And then, although we have this information already, it's helpful to see that people were interested in seeing the David Douglas School District and Park Grove School District as a community of interest. So one other real quick point is, to date, Flow has been concentrated on the submissions that are what you'll encounter first here. However, if you scroll way to the bottom, there are also a section called Works in Progress. So Commissioner Valdini, this is why we didn't have yours processed when we started the meeting tonight, but we now have it ready because it wasn't saved and put to the public gallery. It was down here in the draft maps, 180449. So the nuance there is when you are in Districtor and you hit save, it should pop open a box. And the default is to say share now, and that's going to put it in that public gallery at the top. But if you're not sure you want to share it like in that way, kind of finalize it, so to speak, you might want to mark it as a work in progress and still put your name or the name of it on there and save as a draft. And that's what's going to distinguish where it is in Districtor. In any case, we can get to these. All you needed to do is give us the URL that has that ID number in it. So let me switch to the different map. Commissioner Valdini, if you can confirm this is the map that you drew and wanted to take a look at.
Alex? Alex, hi. I have a question before you get into this map around District R, which is if you see a particular map that's been posted and it looks like it has interesting features, but you would like to open it up and play with those features and create revisions to that and then save it. Is that all you do? Open it up and then save it under a new name, and it'll give it a new version number, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really, I could show it, but it's really that simple. You can click on any of the maps, whether they are an official submission more at the top or even a draft. So once you have that open, you make changes and you save it, it's going to create a new ID and a new submission.
If I may just build on that question, would you probably want to create a duplicate and then rename it because you don't want to go ahead then and change someone else's original submission without asking them for it?
Yeah, it's actually going to do that automatically. So
Okay.
When you go in and you make a change, it'll automatically create a new sequential ID. There's no way that you can alter someone else's map once they've submitted it.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Commissioner Valdini, this is the map.
This is my map, and I also wanted to say that this is not me saying this is what I want, and that's why I was so hesitant to publish it officially, because I didn't want any of the public to think that my mind was made up in any way. My mind is not made up. This is just me looking at data, me drawing lines and coming up with something that I think is cool, but I just want to emphasize I am not married to this. It's just an idea.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. And I will be clear too, from Flow's perspective, the sample maps we showed tonight were just a response to what we've heard so far, what we've seen posted on district are they're very simply, ideas to look at and start to discuss. So if there's anything you'd like to point out in this map, we could look at, I could zoom in, we could look at some of the major boundaries. I also have the statistics, which have the overall deviation, things like that, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I would love to see the statistics. I think, I made various decisions at various points about this map. It's just a series of choices about trying to look at the data in the other websites and putting like with like and finding groups that have things in common and putting them together. And it's 150 little decisions all around the map. So.
Sure, I can pull them up, but I'll just state them now and we can jump over to it if we need to see it. But I will say that it's a 3.6% overall deviation. So well balanced in terms of population. The district that is least populated is District 2. So let me just remind myself, as well as you all, that 2 in this case is, again, arbitrary numbers, is that orange color. That is the district that's underpopulated by about 4,000, so not much. And then the most populated district is District 4. In that case, it's this green color that is overpopulated or over the ideal by about 2,000. And if it'd be helpful, this is the chance where we can maybe start seeing how we view this with some of the other supplemental data that we've been discussing. So neighborhood boundaries, we can turn those on, get a sense of how this plan puts neighborhoods in the different districts. So as you can see, green, is adhering to these neighborhood boundaries pretty well. There's not a lot of splits. And when there are, it might make perfect sense when we drive in and we look at some of the boundaries that are being used, like Columbia Boulevard, being used as a boundary between these two districts. Technically, based on this large neighborhood boundary, it is dividing the neighborhood between two. But this is, kind of a point of discussion where does it, these neighborhood boundaries might be somewhat arbitrary in areas when you compare it to major arterial roads. So things to consider. Feel free, anybody, to ask for other things they'd like to see at the same time overlaid with this plan.
Is this include the entirety of the Park Rose School District in one district?
Yes.
Let's see. Bear with me, I might have to change some of the colors of these boundaries. This is, it's hard to see, but yes, this is the Park Rose School District right here in that green boundary. So it is completely within that orange district. David Douglas likewise is being used as the literal boundary between those two districts here. And when it deviates slightly, that is just the nature of the blocks, not aligning perfectly to the David Douglas School District boundary, but for all intents and purposes, yes, David Douglas is wholly within that district.
Can you throw the neighborhoods back up so we can see what happens to Lentz on here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lentz is one that is exactly, I think it was Commissioner Lumley you were describing. There are some of these neighborhood boundaries like Lentz that span 205, right? So this is that area right here.
This is an excellent illustration, though, of a place where if you were to stick to the neighborhood boundary, you'd land in one place. If you were to stick to the school district boundary, you land in a different place because the neighborhood overlaps the school district. And the question for us is, what is the community here? Is it the hard neighborhood association boundary? Is it the school district boundary? What matters to us, to the community, the people we talk to? It's a great illustration of the tough choices that we have ahead of us.
Commissioner Valdini, did you think about, as you were figuring out on your map where you jumped the river for the West Side District, what made you decide to choose the southern part of the city versus the central part of the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are really two factors. Percentage of home ownership was part of the calculation, and then income similarities was another part of the calculation. Again, it's really hard to make it perfect, but that's where I saw a high level of similarity across those variables. But again, it's just a draft.
Speaking of that, while we were in this meeting, I was able to add a couple things to the web application that I want to be clear is not Districtor, but rather this one that has the additional data. So when you open that, kind of two things that have come up recently in terms of what's helping to kind of conceptualize some things like where this boundary could be, has been income and owner and renter occupation of housing units. So I just wanted to show that in the supplemental, actually, excuse me, in the Census Bureau tab here, because this is Census Bureau data, there's a median household income. This is from the American Community Survey. It's by census tract. It's the most recent data available. So this is going to have that information based on those geographies. So from the legend here, it's you can see that it's grouping or shading darker green the tracts with higher median household income, lower with the yellowish lighter shades. There's also a layer for owner and renter occupied housing. It's kind of showing what's showing is called the category, predominant categories. So this is block group level data. So you can see here block groups, as we discussed earlier, a little bit smaller than tracts. They break up tracts. What it's going to show is if it's green, it's predominantly owner occupied. If it's that yellowish gold color, it's predominantly renter occupied. And then the darkness or hue, if I'm not mistaken, is how predominant that is. So for instance, this area around Irvington, owner occupied, predominant block groups, and very much so compared to another area, maybe around Mount Tabor, that is still majority owner occupied, but it's more of a mixture. If that makes sense. One other quick thing I want to point out is in here, there's now a section called district maps. It's not possible to add everything from Districtor, but going forward, we're going to put in the draft maps that the commission is focused on, especially those that will take to the public hearings, and we can add those in. So for instance, here we have sample maps, and then that allows you to toggle on that supplemental data or any of the Census Bureau information and see how it aligns with these particular maps.
Could you show what that looks like when they're overlapped?
The sample maps?
The sample map and then some census data together.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, with the shading, that's going to be, let's see, a little tough. We can try to get creative on how that works. Colors are going to kind of blend together a little bit here. So you might want to have to do some toggling on and off to kind of get a sense of how.
Is it possible for the district maps to have hard, dark boundaries around them?
Sure.
Thank you. This is super helpful.
Of course. I can continue to share or explore maps, but I'll just back to you guys for direction.
Actually, could you do me a favor? I'm having a hard time saving mine. Could you show us how to save and tag it once again?
Sure. Okay. You see my screen starting at Independent District Commission website. Okay, so I'm going to go to submit a district map. Here to access the web application. I actually have one in mind that I like, let's say, for instance, maybe I want to start with this one that's been submitted recently. So I click on that. Perhaps I see a point that I want to change. Maybe I will change some of this area from teal to green. And expand the teal down here. Once I'm done with my change, I still see it's, fairly well balanced. You hit save. That should pop up. It's going to give you a new number when you save this, and you can share now, and that's going to be published to the top of the list where I just accessed this plan. Otherwise, you could make it a work in progress because maybe you're not sure and you want to think about it overnight and make some changes tomorrow morning, but you can still put your plan in here and then hit save as draft, and that's going to enter it into the district or webpage.
Yeah, I'm not that screen that pops up when you hit save.
Mm-hmm.
Mine doesn't look like that, but we can take it offline.
Okay, yeah, we can follow up.
We have about 10 minutes left. Before moving to next steps, does anyone want to give Flo any additional directions? Or is there any motion? Commissioner Chisholm?
Yeah, I would just encourage commissioners to develop your own maps, submit them, encourage us to look at them. I encourage the public to do the same. And again, if you want one for us to really consider it, please submit written testimony. I mean, for the public, not commissioners, to submit written testimony telling us what you were trying to accomplish. I think that'd be super valuable. Looking forward very much to seeing sort of these formal submissions rather than the sort of creative brainstorms that are in the gallery. And thank you to Alex and Kimmy and the team at Flow for playing along with us and doing the additional analysis on the maps that get sort of more formally submitted. That's gonna be hugely helpful.
If I could just jump in here real quick. There are a lot of maps that are already posted, and several of them are obviously not going to meet our criteria. One is the Portland City flag, there's several spirals, a bullseye. And is it possible to filter out those that really do meet the criteria that we're required to under the charter? Because some of these people are having fun with it, and I like having fun too, but there's so much to choose from. It's hard to go through the gallery and find out which ones are that we can legitimately consider.
Unfortunately, it's out of our control on the districtor page. Correct, Kimmy?
Yeah, but
You guys
when
have filter wrong. I mean, just like, can you identify those? It could be just a list. Like, these are the ones that meet the criteria. These ones don't.
Yeah, any maps that meet the criteria will, the analysis that Alex showed earlier with the sample maps, we'll be providing those with all of the maps on Districtor. Obviously, some of them will clearly not meet the criteria, and we will not be analyzing those as creative as they are. So.
What I was trying to do, because there are a ton of maps, both drafts and published ones, but I found that you could definitely gather themes in looking at them. And even if you didn't look at every tiny little place that they drew a specific line, you got an overall sense of how people, what was trending, in how people were looking at, for instance, the East Side. And I just was interested in kind of assessing, engaging that.
Commissioner Chisholm?
Yeah, I'll just put a sharper point on what I said earlier. I do think you can look at all these maps and kind of scroll through them and see themes. It's very much worth noting, though, that there's no one person, one map rule here. You could be looking at 20 maps and deducing a theme, but it's 20 maps by one person who may be wanting to stuff the ballot box, as it were, or is just like iterating on the theme, just like experimenting and playing and, you know, drinking vodka tonics and drawing maps. And so I think we need to be very careful about that. What I would love to see, make this productive, it is to, if folks submit maps with testimony, that is sort of like, this is my thing I want to share with you. And commissioners who submit maps that they want the commission to talk about, perhaps, Sophia, it'd be possible to then itemize those maps on the city website with links directly to the maps, since we can't control the district or public gallery. And I don't think we want to. We want lots of chaos there, but to then create a place on the city website, the IDC website, that says these are the ones that have been sort of, shall we say, more formally submitted. I don't know if that needs to be a motion or just a housekeeping thing you're going to do.
No, just a housekeeping. Sophia? Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts before we move to next steps? Okay, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Van Sickle Robbins.
Thanks, Amber. Before we close, I'd just like to thank all my fellow commissioners for the opportunity to serve with Commissioner Saxena as your co-chairs. It was a really rewarding experience for me, and I wanted to extend a special thank you to the staff and the consultants for all of their support during our tenure. And I also wanted to affirm to our new co-chairs that any help that I can provide with what you're going to be working on, I'm at your service. Our next meeting is on May 3rd from 6 to 9 p.m. And as was mentioned, it is public. We have two public comment sessions in May, and then a work session at the end of May. Our meeting will be a hybrid meeting, virtual via Zoom and in person at the Portland Building in room 100. And room 100 is in the first floor of the Portland Building. There's actually a window looking into the room from the street, so you can knock on it and wave at people. And I wanted to thank everyone who joined us tonight. And with that, our meeting's adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.